And then because we have a full session today, and people can join as they can. So let me turn my camera on. Welcome back, everybody. Hello to everyone. I see we have quite a few participants now coming on. You're most welcome today. This is our 4th workshop out of 6 workshops. Already number 4. I don't know how it went by so quickly, but this is the 4th workshop in our short course in gender responsive education in Sub-Saharan Africa. Would everyone like to turn on their cameras for a moment and just say hello to the group? I see Sarafino is here from South Sudan. Welcome back. Hi, everyone. Matafeng is here. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, good, good.
Thank you.
Thank you for Matsalisu. Sorry.
Hello, everyone. How are you?
Good to have you back.
Good, thank you.
Okay, we have a small group right now, but I think more people will be joining on. Usually we have about 30 people, 30 to 35 participants. Yes. Hello. Okay, let me get started. Okay, so colleagues, we're gathering today for our 4th workshop. Could you go to the next slide, please, Gabriel? Let's just look quickly at some of the same rules that apply to all of our sessions to make things friendly and interactive. So as you know, we have the same Zoom link every week. When you're here, we would like if you put yourself on mute when you're not speaking. There will always be time to speak, but we put ourselves on mute until that time has come so that we don't have to mute you ourselves if someone's presenting. And if you could add your country name after your name in Zoom, that would be helpful so we can see the diversity in the room. There are so many countries here. We have 19 countries in our KICS Africa 19 hub, and then others from different countries, Namibia, South Africa. So please put your name in your country name after your name in Zoom. Keep your questions direct and concise to save time for everybody to ask questions. And keep in mind that we're all here to learn, all of us. Doesn't matter where we're from, how much or how little we know about these topics, we're all going to learn something from each other. Gabriel, next slide, please. Colleagues, as we know, there are 3 parts to this short course. The first is these 6 workshops that we've been having. There are 2 more next week. Then after that, we're going to invite you to create a professional action plan that details your commitments to prioritize gender equity in your normal work agendas, what you normally do, but how can you add or prioritize or integrate gender more strongly in your work. So it may be there already. You may want to just strengthen your focus and reprioritize, or you may not be prioritizing gender in your work yet. And then how can you start to do so? So, and also we want you to detail the resources that you'll need to do that, especially the knowledge resources. Maybe if there's some research that you need more information about, if you need to learn more about a topic, and also any alliances or any consultations you need to prioritize gender in your work plan. Do you have to consult with your superior? Do you have to consult maybe with the gender unit in your ministry? Do you need to come back to us to learn more about a certain topic? What do you need in order to prioritize gender in your normal work plan? At this time of year, we're usually making our plans for the next year. So this time is good for us. So this is something that you'll do in starting after December 7th, throughout the month of December, and then early January. And module 3 is a session for you to present your practical action plan for feedback. And that will be taking place sometime in mid to late January when we come back after a month-long holiday. Next slide, please, Gabriel. Now, I've seen that some people have been asking, how do I make up for a missed session? I have this other meeting, I have some other work to do. If you miss a session, and we want you to take part in all sessions because that's how you get your certificate of appreciation, but participation. So you'll get a certificate of participation if you join all 6 workshops. But if you miss one for any reason, you can make up for the session by watching the Zoom recording afterwards, and we make them all available to you in the resource pack. You can complete any work that was assigned. If there was a case study assigned, or if there was a worksheet or a question, you can make up what the work was, and you can email the facilitators a summary of your responses to the questions that are posed in the session. The questions are usually posed by Mercy, our course facilitator, and they're posted on the slides that are also shared with you. So if you read the question and if you send us a response to your questions, we'll count that as making up for the missed session. We might give you some feedback and ask you to maybe go a little bit deeper on your response, but that's how you can make up for a missed session. Next slide, please, Gabriel. And then finally, just want to remind you about some of our important links for this short course. We have a WhatsApp group that is specifically for discussions in these topics. Please join it if you haven't joined it already. It's not a group where there'll be any spam or any unrelated content. It's all related to this group, and it's monitored by us at UNESCO ICPA. We have a resource pack with PowerPoints, recordings, and knowledge resources in that link. I'll share it in the chat box. And we have a parking lot for ongoing questions and ideas and realizations. In this parking lot, you can comment and add questions, or you can do the questions in the chat box. And if we can't get to them in the Q&A sessions, we will add them to the parking lot. You might want to check this because we've been answering your questions. So please do check that parking lot if you've asked a question and see our responses to your questions. Gabriel, next slide, please. And let me pass it over to our wonderful course facilitator, Mercy Mupavayenda. Over to you, Mercy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marianne, for reminding us and giving us all those links and all the information that's very, very important for us to be able to finalize our community of practice. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our guest speakers, and thank you so much for joining us and taking time out from your very, very busy schedules to come and talk to us and our participants. So I'm going to start off with a session 3 recap, just to remind us of some of the topics, some of the concepts that we engaged last week. Please, may I have the next slide? Yes. So our main topic for session 3 was exploring evidence-based programs from Sub-Saharan Africa that are increasing girls' enrollment, retention, and also programs that are reintegrating girls who drop out for various reasons. Our terms and concepts to explore were evidence-based programs, enrollment, retention, dropout, and reintegration. Yes, we can go to the next slide. Yes. So before I speak, I ask our participants what some of the things that they remember from last week. I'm just going to read out some of the comments that I found posted on various platforms, like this one, which says, I learned, we had asked the participants in the survey what they learned, and this participant said, I learned that where there is intervention, girls' education will improve, and as the challenges are multifold, the interventions should be multi-sectoral. I really like this comment, and it shows that when we did our session 2, when we spoke about intersectionality and intersecting forms of structural inequality, there is an understanding, and it's showing in the comments that we are getting. Thank you, please. Next slide. Yes, we had another participant who also took issue with one of the articles and one of the case studies that we were using, and she mentioned that we need to think more about language use, because in most of the materials that we are using, you'll find that the term child marriage keeps getting used. And according to this participant, it's contradictory to say child and marriage, because a marriage may be deemed a legal engagement of two parties who can give consent. So a child cannot be married, which means that, the participant then said, in her view, this should be called a defilement. I'll open the floor later just to hear what some of our participants also think. I remember last week, I also took issue with an article that we used, one case study that we used, which started off by saying that girls need to be sent to schools because when they're at home, there's a whole lot of pregnancies that happen. And we find that such language silences who the perpetrator is, and instead focuses on quote unquote maybe a victim. So it's something that we need to think about, even as we think about the language that's also in our curriculums, as we said last week. Thank you. Next slide. Yes. There was also another comment from one of our participants in South Africa who said that as a member of a feminist group at a South African universities in the 1980s, and then she says, yes, that far back, we challenged these stereotypes in education textbook, but here we are 40 years later having the same debates. It makes one wonder how much we must bang on doors for them to open for gender transformation. I understand, and I think I also agree with this statement, but I'm also interested later on when we are talking in an open forum, for example, to understand when the participant says for them, like who is them? I would be interested to know some of the people that we think we can actually hold accountable to see gender equality and equity become a reality in our lifetime. Thank you. Next slide. Yes. So maybe while we are waiting for this slide, in fact, before I go, I would like to engage our participants to just maybe also say what they remember from last week, what they learned, what they thought, maybe what they didn't know before, or what you found to be helpful, or if you still have any questions that you want engaged with later. I'm opening the floor now. You can put up your hand if you want to speak, like what was striking for you last week. Are we thinking? I'll start picking people now. Mr. Sarafino, please tell us what you think about last week. What did you take away from last week's session?
Okay. Can I speak?
Yes, sir, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much for this good time. We have come back again.
Yes.
You know, the takeaway is we need to have a strong policy.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have, you know, the backup of the policy maker. If the policy maker, they are not standing in a program such as this, so it will be very difficult to implement or to succeed. I'm trying to say it like people in the parliament.
Okay.
They have to enact a law which is need to be implemented with the backup from the community themselves. Let me give a typical example. I was been some week back. I was in Malawi, I saw how the Malawi people are standing together, the community, the women, you know, the court, the military, they work together. I'm trying to say intersectoral approach. It is a very, very important in succeeding in this program, in this activity. That's what I'm saying.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes, we do agree with you. Yes, I think that's what we found out, because we've been talking about, you know, how there are so many oppressions that are intersecting, and the systems themselves are intersecting, such that even when girls sometimes are given the cash transfers, they still probably can't get to school because there's a river that's overflooding and they can't cross, or they don't have food. So yeah, there's a lot of challenges at different system levels. Thank you so much, Serafino.
Okay, not at all.
Yes. I think I saw someone from Lesotho. Lesotho, Matsedi, so would you like to come in?
Not really, Messi.
You have nothing that you would like to talk about, or that you want maybe explained later from last week? Do you feel that you understood and you are fine?
The
Can I
only
try?
thing that, okay, the only thing
No.
that I think I didn't understand in the last session was that table that we filled in the during the breakaway sessions. We didn't
Yes.
finish, so I was asking if maybe we can continue individually and submit it individually. I didn't get that part specifically.
Okay.
Yes.
So
Thank
can I try?
for
Merci.
bringing that up. We did say that we would like all of you to fill the table and submit, but just in a few minutes now, I'm also going to take you through the table as a recap, so that when you are now working on it on your own, you have a better understanding of what we are looking for, and what's also should be helpful for you when you are now working on your community of practice.
Okay, thank you, Messi.
Thank you. You can go ahead, Petros.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Mercy. From the last week, the things that I understand is whenever there is a support, as I learned from the Ghanaian experience, women's results can improve. Dropout, success rates will be there, but the problem is failure to support girls' education. And whenever we support girls, we can support the participation of women at national, economic, social, and political issues of countries. So helping girls really matters. And whenever we invest on girls' education, for sure, we can reverse the situations in our countries. Similar to Ghana, I have been in a project where in Ethiopia, where girls were improving in their education. So support matters. Concerning the table, we do have a female leadership strategy where we motivate female teachers to come to leadership positions in schools and other levels of the education system. I failed to bring it to the conference because of time, as I do have many schedules. So for sure, I will bring one.
Thank you so much.
Next time. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, we would really appreciate it. And I think from the learning we've been having, it should become clear that I know that sometimes, I remember when I was training some media managers and journalists a few years ago, one of the ladies who now had a very top position in government made a statement and said that we try to help women, but they don't seem to be, they don't seem to want to take up positions. So based on that statement, we later on decided that we should actually train people so that they can have a better understanding of the various challenges that women face. Because, for example, you may say you want to second someone to go into a leadership position, but how far do they stay? Do they have cooking duties at home? Are they the only one? Can they travel at night? So it's, as we come to know more about gender inequality, we'll begin to understand that there are intersecting challenges that girls and women face that are gendered, so much that when we say we are promoting them or we are motivating them, we should also look into what challenges do they face that stop them from taking these positions and deal with those challenges first. But thank you so much for your contribution, Petros.
Thank you, Mercy. And this is one of the major challenges that we have identified in Ethiopia too. We do have 11% of the teachers, the leaders in the education system, while the share of female teachers is many. And one of the critical challenge with the females is disinterest to the leadership position. This is because of many factors. They do have many assignments to perform at home. You know, the community demands them to do a lot. So they don't have time to invest in schools as the men did, because it's known that men are free easily than women. Women have so many challenges. This leads to the disinterest that we identified, as we said, just to supplement. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. An example I can also give is in Zimbabwe, for example, I mean, research, and also I know through lived experience, if you notice, even in politics, women who take up those positions, they get attacked a lot. They get a lot of sexist comments. Sometimes they actually even get abducted, you know. So there are a lot of issues that are contributing sometimes to not have women in top positions. Thank you. I think we can now go. I see some people are putting their comments in the chat box. Thank you so much. We'll find time to read them. So now we are going to look at one of the countries. We had 3 countries last week that we were looking at for evidence-based programs in Sub-Saharan Africa, looking at increasing girls' enrollment and keeping girls in school as well as reintegrating them when they drop out. So this particular case study is looking more at enrollment and retention. Can you please move it up a little for me? Yes. So just as an explainer, we are expecting that each and every person should fill in this form, maybe at your own convenience, and send it to us, because then whatever information you feel, especially if it's about your own country, we'll be able to feature it in the community of practice that will be published later. So at the top of the form here, I had asked if participants would identify policy and practice. So in fact, what I was saying is that when you get this form and you have your case study as well, and you're about to start filling it up, these are the 2 outcomes that you should have in mind. The fact that participants will identify policy and practice options and planning and mobilization strategies to prioritize gender equity in their education system. And also that we want to establish a community of practice for continued learning and partnership, especially focusing on South-to-South exchange of evidence and strategies. So if you don't know of any evidence-based practice from your own country, you should be able to benefit from other countries that are also sharing. But it's highly unlikely that there's any country which wouldn't have evidence-based programs. Like last week, we mentioned DREAMS, and the fact that DREAMS, the one that the US government is partnering with African governments to do, has been rolled out in 17 African countries since 2015. So the first thing you'd do is name the intervention, and then the second thing you do when you are looking at the case study is try to identify the barrier that led to the intervention that you are studying. So for example, this one was Niger, right? Gender. So the general problem was gender disparity in education due to child marriage. But specifically in Niger, 83% of the population resides in rural areas where availability of middle schools is limited, particularly outside of urban areas. So I won't be reading everything, but I just want you to get the sense of what's required. And then you also go to context, and here we see that this country holds the lowest ranking in both gender inequality and gender development indices. So a significant concern is that 76% of women aged 20 to 24 in that country enter into marriage before reaching 18 years old, and a striking 28% of them are married before the age of 15. So you are now seeing here with specific evidence, you have statistics that are telling you what is then, not only are they issues, impediments and barriers, but you also have them outlined in specific ways, as opposed to just sometimes what we see, just general sweeping statements about what's going on. And then after that, you will look at the objectives of the intervention. So as you are reading the case study, you will see that if it's a journal article, they will always say, why was this study carried out? So in this case, the article examined whether eliminating financial and logistical barriers to secondary education could stop plans for early marriage. So in other words, there's an article that was written as analysis, but then there's also the intervention that actually took place. So this is what the intervention here is what's being referred to. And then after that, you will move to summary of the intervention, right? So here, for this particular country, I found that girls around the age of 13 who were beginning middle school were provided with a scholarship that covered the expenses of secondary education, including housing, food, school supplies. And upon their admission to middle schools, this scholarship was extended for a 3-year period spanning from 2017 to 18, between 2017 and 2020, but for 3 years. The scholarship amounted to $306 per year per learner, with the condition that the recipients would stay enrolled and not repeat more than 1 year during this period. Yes. So, and then it goes on to also speak about the intervention, the mechanisms that were used, which I'm not going to get into. You'll be able to read that for yourself. And then after that, you look at possible threats to the intervention. So here we found that although this intervention is promising, its effectiveness may be undermined in contexts which, like Niger, are characterized by strong conservative gender norms, low women empowerment, poor quality education, and limited labor market opportunities. And then after that, you look out for how the program was actually implemented, and then you put that in there, and then you move on to program results. So are they actually results where we can see what did the intervention manage to improve? So here we are told that the intervention had a positive impact on both the aspirations of the girls and the aspirations that their mothers had for them across various dimensions, including education, work, and family. And then when we move to success indicators, we are told that there was a 52.5%, 52.5% decrease in the likelihood to have dropped out of school amongst the recipients. And then previous indicators, early marriages often lead to reduced educational attainment as girls drop out of school for household duties. And then there is also a column where you can put in information about challenges and lessons learned. Here we are told that light conditionality in terms of the scholarship given can be sufficient to increase the retention of girls in school. In other words, what they're saying is that if you put too many conditions, sometimes it won't also work. People will not respond. They need to feel that you give them the money and you give them room to maneuver. Yes. Yes, so that brings us to the end. So last week when we were doing case studies in our various Zoom breakout rooms, this is what we were meant to be looking out for. So when you have time, you could also send us your own interventions in your own country on this form. Is there anyone else who still has any questions before I move on, or are things a bit clearer now? Maybe I would ask the participant who had pointed out that she didn't understand. Hi, Matsiti, so are we together? Do you now understand?
Hello, Nancy. You know,
Yeah.
what I didn't understand, I was wondering if maybe when we are applying the evidence from our country, we will be applying, basing ourselves on the given example that you are using now, or what we do?
No, you see that when we gave you the form, we gave you an example that's filled out, and we also gave you a blank form. So you use the blank one from start to finish. You put your own country statistics.
Okay, I get you now.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's a bit clearer now.
Yes, okay.
Okay.
Also, when you have quick questions, also don't hesitate to put them on our WhatsApp group. We can always answer them at any time. Thank you so much, Gabrielle. We can move back to our slides. I'm not sure how I'm doing for time, but I'm
Mercy, it's been about, sorry, just wanted to let you know that we have 20 minutes before the top of the hour.
Okay, all right. So I'm just going to introduce the topic and then hand over to our first guest speaker. I'll hand over to Marianne to do the introduction. But for now, so today is our introduction to session 4. Our main topic for today is examining gender responsive education sector planning, which we call GRESP, and resource mobilization strategies to hardwire gender in the education sector. So participants will examine and hopefully gain essential understanding of gender responsive education sector planning, as well as resource mobilization strategies, as I've pointed out. Prior to starting the sessions, we did have participants wanting to know as well what gender responsive planning or indicators look like. So today is a very good day to also pay attention to hear what our invited guests are going to say about the indicators and also the planning. Thank you. Next slide. Yes. So our key terms today are gender responsive education, sector planning, and resource mobilization strategies. The questions to keep in mind are, what are some of the principles and practices of developing and implementing GRESP? What are some of the effective resource mobilization strategies for GRESP? Can you identify the various system levels where GRESP takes place and some of the important stakeholders at each level of planning, especially in your own country, and also in the case studies that we are going to be using? Thank you. Yes. So I'm just going to give one sentence definition, then hand over. So gender responsive education sector planning is a whole system approach to advancing gender equality in and through education, including learning and learning environments, teacher education and practice, curriculum and materials development, and leadership and administration. You can see that it involves from start to end of the whole education sector. Yes, I think I'm going to stop here now and hand over to Marianne to introduce our guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Mercy. It's my pleasure to introduce our first guest speaker. We have two guest speakers today, Mr. Simon Zippa. He is going to be taking us through a presentation about GRESP, or Gender Responsive Education System Planning. Simon is an education specialist at UNICEF and working with the UN Girls Education Initiative. That's UNGEI or UNGEI. He's the manager for the Gender at the Center initiative. Over to you, Simon.
Thank you, Marianne. Happy to be joining this webinar. Next slide, please. Okay, as Marianne said, today we are going to talk about GREPS. And first of all, let us talk about the Gender at the Center initiative, because through this initiative, we have been doing a lot on GREPS. The Gender at the Center initiative is a whole system approach to gender transformative education, combining supply and demand side interventions. It's a multi-stakeholder initiative jointly coordinated by UNGEI and IIP UNESCO, and wrote it, in gender responsive education sector planning. GTI has an alliance which form a partnership of a global movement for gender transformative education, which meets regularly. The alliance has like 80 members, and currently we are quite in the end of phase 1 of this initiative, and next phase will start January for 2 years. Next, please. Next slide, please. As I said before, the Gender at the Center initiative has an alliance. It's a multi-stakeholder initiative coordinated by UNGEI and IIP with civil society organization consortium composed by ANSEFA, FAWE, and Plan International. We also have a technical partner, which has mainly GP, UNICEF, UNESCO, AU, CFA, and we also have G7 donors who are supporting the initiative. And these donors are coming from France, Germany, Italy, United Kingdom, and we also have the European Union. Next, please. Okay, as I said, even this initiative, we have been doing a lot on gender responsive education sector planning. The graph itself has been developed by Ungai and GP in 2014. It's embedding gender equality in the DNA of education sector planning. We have developed a toolkit composed of a graph guidance. Using this graph guidance can allow you to do gender analysis, to also prepare plan, and also a product plan. We also developed a graph facilitator manual, which gives you the indication on how to implement a graphs. As I said, GTI has been an opportunity to work a lot on graphs, and we have been organizing regional and national workshops for partner. And for instance, next week, we are organizing a regional workshop for a participant coming from 8 countries in Africa. Next, please. In addition to the graphs, a toolkit resource, we also develop what we call the guest toolkit, or a gender equality in education snapshot toolkit. Actually, it's a tool that various actors together use to conduct a rapid assessment of gender equality in and for education. The tool itself is very interactive, user-friendly tools according to those who practice it. And it has been developed for Ministry of Education, SELECT, and civil society actors. And we have already gotten the opportunity to pilot the guest toolkit through GCI in Chad, in Mali, in Niger, and in Guinea. And we have a lot of testimony certifying that the results of this girl toolkit has been impactful for them when taking part in the education sector planning. Next, please. What the guest tool is about, it's an holistic approach to assessing gender equality, and it has been built around a series of indicators, actually across this 6 key area, based on the accountability for gender equality in education, or AG framework. And these areas are education opportunities, gender norm and practices, institution outside education, education laws and policies, education systems, and education outcome. Next, please. This is an example of some question and indicator that you will find when, for instance, using the guest tool, the guest toolkit, and for instance, addressing the key one of the component taken to work on this toolkit. Here it's the institutional outside education. You will see that there are some questions on the level of gender discrimination, ratification of CEDAW. For instance, does the law allow children to marry? And is the country affected by conflicts? So to all these questions, the guest toolkit in its administration process will gather together various actors of the education in the country. For instance, the Minister of Education member, the LEG member, civil society member, and together they are going to feed, the tool. The tool is online with the information being requested, and in the end, you will have the situation about all the parameters for which we will have introduced the indicator. Next, please. And this is an example of results after a guest toolkit being made in Mali. For instance, you can see that in terms of education laws and policies, they are doing good. It's from height equality, in terms of equality. But for instance, in terms of gender norm practices, as you can see, it's low equality. This means that there are a lot of things allowed to be done in order to address those issues. Next, please. And this is a link where you can access this guest toolkit I'm speaking about. As I said, it's very friendly and easy to use. And we'll be sharing the link with you. And if you are interested in having more information in all those resources and toolkit, you can just get in touch with us. Thank you, and over to you, Marian.
Thank you so much, Simon. We know that there's a lot of resources that UNGAY has on GRESP, and I think today we're just getting started unpacking them and going through them. So we'll be in touch with all of you participants about some of these resources, and we really want to make you feel comfortable in referring to them and even using them in your own systems. So Simon touched upon some important ones today. We're going to be returning to them later on when we have the question and answer session, but also in future sessions. So I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker. So Gabriel, if you can share the slides, please. Thank you so much. We have another wonderful guest speaker today. Sally Roscorns is an education and gender specialist at the Gender at the Center initiative at the IIEP through UNESCO. The IIEP is the International Institute of Education Planning, which focuses on technical support to ministries of education across sub-Saharan Africa and developing capacity and gender-responsive education sector planning. Sally has worked on numerous relevant research and development programs and draws on substantial international experience in her work. So Sally, we're happy to have you here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and hello to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here. When my colleagues and I first heard about this new community of practice taking shape, we were really excited, and now to see it in fruition is even more exciting. So well done to all of you for becoming part of it. And I hope you're not getting too overwhelmed by information and terminology and jargon. It's great that you're looking at so many real case studies to see these concepts in practice. So thanks to Mercy and to Simon for introducing the topic so well. Simon and I, and well, Simon and his colleagues and myself and my colleagues, we work together on the Gender at the Centre initiative. We're really committed to working alongside people like yourselves in ministries, as well as people in civil society and in other institutions and organizations in your countries, to really spread the word and spread the understanding about gender responsive education sector planning. So what I'm going to do is talk about how IIEP puts in practice the theory and some of the tools you've just heard about. And I'll be really happy to take any questions afterwards or to hear about your own experience of trying to apply this approach. So if we go to the next slide, you can see here that we're going to look at 3 different ways in which we use the approach in sectoral analysis, institutional analysis, and in planning. So planning actually, as we'll see, covers the sort of pre and post to the actual sitting down and writing a plan. Next slide, please. So as you can see on the left here, we can conceptualize how, in order to create a plan, we need to know things. How are we going to inform that plan? And Simon's explained to you how the snapshot works. Well, once you've got the results of that snapshot, that will help you to plan in a way that enhances gender equality, because you know what the current situation is. So we're going to talk just for the next 10 minutes or so about how to make education sector analysis, which takes place in every country, how to make it gender responsive, and what can be added to that in terms of an institutional analysis. So that's more of an inside look as well as an outside look at the status of gender equality, and how that can help us to perform or produce, if you like, a gender responsive sectoral plan. So as you can see here, it's really about putting gender everywhere, wearing a gender lens, if you like, mainstreaming gender, we sometimes call it, hardwiring gender equality into everything we do. It's really about having that foundation or backdrop, if you like, to everything that we do, rather than doing our analysis and plan and then saying, oh, should we say something about gender equality? We talk about gender equality from the start. In the next slide, you can see how this is represented in the cycle of planning. And some of you may be familiar with this type of flowchart diagram in your own ministries, perhaps, and perhaps, I don't know what all of your jobs are, but I'm sure that you can relate to perhaps just one of these for your own work, or maybe more than one of them. Perhaps you're involved in the statistics unit, perhaps you work in a gender unit, perhaps you work in research, perhaps you work in finance. Most people in the ministry, the planning cycle will touch them, or they will contribute to it in some way or other. So as you can see, we can put gender responsive into every part of the planning cycle. And sometimes we might think that, well, we didn't make this plan gender responsive, we'll just have to wait for the next one. But that might be in 5 years' time. Well, what we would say is that actually you can start becoming more gender responsive at any point in the cycle, whether it's by reviewing expenditure and seeing if you can do that with a gender lens on, looking at who benefited from the expenditure, for example, or looking at your data sets. Are they all gender disaggregated? Can you alter that in the next annual cycle of data collection, for example? So we can start at any time, and we take it into account everywhere. Next slide, please. And I know you've already been talking about these issues, but just a reminder about why gender is important in the planning cycle. And it's because policies and plans are not neutral. And as Mercy was giving examples, and I know you've already discussed this in previous sessions, they can affect boys and girls differently. So if we use one example of a country where perhaps they're investing heavily in expanding school infrastructure, building lots of new schools, but perhaps in that context, there's a widespread norm for either girls or boys to disengage from education at a certain level, let's say at the end of lower secondary, for example. Perhaps boys tend to go into informal work at that age. Or if families don't think that school is a safe place for their sons or daughters to be, and therefore they keep them away, then however many schools are built, it won't change the fact that there are other reasons why girls and boys are not in those schools. So gender analysis and gender planning and education plan implementation all have an impact and are affected by existing gender inequalities. So if we analyze these, they will help us to highlight students' different needs and to plan appropriate and effective measures to meet them. Next slide, please. So here's the first of our ingredients, if you like, the first layer of analysis that we can make sure is gender responsive. It's the education sector analysis. Next slide. So as you probably are all already familiar with, the aims of an education sector analysis are to give us a full assessment of the education system at a current point in time. The ESA will look at strengths and weaknesses, opportunities and threats in a SWOT analysis, and it can be used as a decision-making tool to prioritize certain levels of education, certain parts of a country, certain aspects of supply, and to bring about coherence across the sector. And it can also be used when ministries of education need to talk to ministries of finance, when there is engagement with teachers' union, or with parents parents and carers of children. So it's a very useful tool, and I expect you've all had to make use of it at some point or another. If you could just click, Gabriel, I think there's another part that will appear here. So in summary, an ESA helps us to identify problems and propose solutions, and helps a country to define the vision for their system, for their education system, taking into account available resources. So next slide, please. So why should we make an ESA gender responsive? If we could just go to the next slide. Perhaps I'm just not seeing it yet. There we go. Well, just as we've just been saying, as a decision-making tool, oh, sorry, it was the one before. I think perhaps my laptop is just lagging a bit. Thank you. So as we were saying before, as a decision-making tool, if the ESA is going to be used to justify investment of resources, then if our ESA is gender responsive, if everything is gender disaggregated and everything is analyzed with a view to trying to understand the causes and the effects of gender inequalities, then it's more likely that we can produce a gender responsive plan. And it's also crucial as an entry point for advocacy that we might want to do, for political dialogue, building consensus, and building commitment on gender equality. So if the ESA fully addresses gender equality, it'll be a much more useful tool for us. Thanks. Now we can go to the next slide. So how will we look at our ESA, and how can we then make it more gender responsive? And some of your ESAs may already contain gender comment on gender or some analysis. But this is how we go about it at IIEP. So we look at all of the chapters in the ESA, and we try to think about how we can bring gender equality view or perspective into each of those chapters. If you could just click, Gabriel, I think a box will appear. So we take into account gender disaggregation of all the data, and we try to carry out intersectional analysis. And that just simply means looking at other aspects that may interact with gender, such as location, is there a different context in different part of the country, such as disability, such as ethnicity, such as poverty? How do these interact with somebody's gender to create inequalities or to give them advantage? And then we can also add in a chapter specifically looking at a gender analysis, looking at the external environment, looking at factors and barriers, and looking at gender mainstreaming. If you click again, Gabriel, I think there's another box that will pop up there. So it can help us to bring in things that will not be covered by other chapters. And a key one is around safeguarding at school and school-related gender-based violence. And that can be dealt with specifically in a gender analysis chapter. Next slide, please. So I hope I've pointed out how a gender-responsive ESA can tell us about the external context, whether it's conducive to gender equality. And remember, at this point, we're not trying to find solutions, we're just trying to understand the context. It can tell us what the key barriers are to gender inequality. And it can tell us about the state of gender mainstreaming within our educational administrations, be they centralized or decentralized, right down to the school level by looking at the gender distribution of teachers and different levels of school, people in charge of schools, school leaders, etc. And it will inform the formulation of policies and the choice of programs. Next slide, please. Now, it's not all easy, it's not all plain sailing, and I'm sure you know that. And here are just some of the challenges that you will encounter, or perhaps you have already encountered, perhaps we can talk about it a bit later, in trying to bring gender responsive lens to an education sector analysis. Sometimes it's difficult to get hold of the data, disaggregated data. Some data is sensitive when it relates to gender, particularly perhaps around gender-based violence. So there can be a lack of data and it can be difficult to get it. There can be poor understanding or different levels of understanding of what gender equality is. And often we'll find, and you may also find, that people think about gender equality as gender parity. So do we have the same number of girls and boys in school? Yes, okay, we achieve gender equality. Well, not necessarily, because what is those girls and boys' experience of education? What else are they having to deal with? How well are they learning? How likely are they to stay in school? So there's more to equality than simple parity, but you might come up against that when you're trying to bring about a mainstreaming approach. Well, I think I've already said it might be limited to looking at access. And we also need to look at these other areas: retention, achievement, learning, career guidance, right through to employment and gendered guidance towards certain sectors and barriers to certain sectors of employment for different genders. And political will. This is a very common barrier. It might actually go so far as resistance, or it might just be that there are so many competing priorities that gender slips down the list. And that often happens particularly in crisis situations where everything is tight. And if people are not used to taking a gender mainstreamed approach to their analysis, then it certainly won't be a time to be able to take on a new perspective. So that's a quick tour of ESA. It'd be great to hear from some of you when we open up the floor as to whether you think that your ESA process and product is already gender responsive, or whether or what your reaction is to that. So let's go on to look at another ingredient towards our gender responsive education sector plan on the next slide. So this is where we actually think about turning the camera, if you like, and turning the microphone inwards to our own institutions, our own ministries, our own departments and units, and asking the question on the next slide, whether or how near the centre, or whether it features at all, whether gender features at all in our administrative functions as well as in our priorities, policies and programs. And of course, if our own house is not gender aware, gender responsive, then it may be very difficult to try to bring gender responsiveness into the programs we are planning and for which we're issuing implementation guidance, etc. You can go to the next slide. At IIEP, we've sort of realised that we've sort of come to this focus fairly recently, and IIEP has a long tradition. It's been in existence since 1963. In fact, just celebrated its 60th year anniversary. We've got a long tradition of institutional analysis of educational administrations, but we've realised over the last few years that few studies and data exist yet on gender dynamics in leadership of educational planning and management, and then all the way down the levels. And you might be aware in your country that most teachers are women, for example, especially at lower levels. But if you think about it and if you look at the data, you'll probably find that in most countries, the highest leadership and management positions are currently occupied by men. And that's just not just in schools or in districts, it might be within our own department. And I heard you talking about it a little bit earlier and about how, oh, well, perhaps it's because women don't want those jobs. Well, that might be how it looks on the surface. If we look underneath the surface, what might we find about what those women have been conditioned to expect, and what other people are expecting of them, and how much encouragement and training, etc., they receive towards progressing within their organizations. So there are lots of things to explore in an institutional analysis, and I'd be happy to talk in more detail another time. But let's for now just look at the next slide. We can see 3 areas which an institutional gender analysis can inform us about. And you can click right through. Thanks, Gabriel. So it can tell us about the staff, the balance between genders. It can tell us about the mandate. How do people think? Do people think about gender equality when they go about their daily tasks in their job? When they're advertising a job, when they're doing a job description, are they using masculine pronouns, for example, to describe a certain position, or feminine pronouns to describe another position? How well are they informed? How well is there any training for staff about gender equality? And what are the barriers and conversely the levers to which the mechanisms, policies, practices, attitudes, which all can contribute to or hinder gender mainstreaming in our places of work? And that's obviously not limited to the education sector. That this is something that can be done in any organization in any country, and with some interesting results. Next slide. So how we sort of support countries to go about this at IIEP is that we talk with the country about how they'd like to do it, but we always recommend that it's a participatory and sort of a self-assessment style exercise, with data coming from consultations, whether they be written or spoken, and a qualitative approach is taken, so that everybody gets a chance to contribute, and that the intention is not to prove something that we already think exists, but actually to take an exploratory approach, which might uncover previously unidentified attitudes and trends within our organization. Next slide, please. These are some of the ways that we recommend, and you can see on the IIEP website some guidance of the types of exercises that can be undertaken. And it's particularly with the online questionnaire, you can reach an awful lot of people in the ministry by issuing a questionnaire, which can be done by mobile phone, in fact. So that's something that we've used in some countries. I think there's one more click there, Gabriel. Thank you. So that's looking outside at what exists, and then looking inside at what the status is. And so finally, and I know I only have a few minutes left, so we can carry on the conversation in the forum section, but finally that helps us then we've laid all the groundwork, we've laid the foundations, and it leads us to be able to take gender into consideration when we develop and produce and then implement our education sector plan. And I know these are developed over several months, and sometimes they take a long time to finalize. So this is really just a taster of the processes that can, or the perspective that can come in when you're working on these. So on the next slide, we'll just acknowledge that most education sector plans actually do include some analysis of gender disparities. I'm sure you would be able to testify to that from your own experience. However, they're often quite limited, and they might often leave you with more questions than answers. Many ESPs also do aim to ensure quality education for girls and boys, and many of them have got approaches which are focused on getting girls into school. You might have in your own country, and I think you discussed it in the last webinar. We've got a specific focus on that. We've got a specific department for that. But the process of actually going through it from each, looking at your plan sort of through a prism and thinking about every aspect will help you to make sure that those specific plans for girls, perhaps, are actually part of your mainstream comprehensive approach to delivering quality education for all children, rather than an adjacent or an add-on. And what has also been found is that often girls' schooling and gender issues are focused on the basic education cycles particularly, and don't sort of go beyond junior secondary school. Although the questions around gender equality go right through to adulthood, so that can be something to check as well. We just pop to the next slide. We will see that as you might be thinking and as you will have experienced, it's difficult with multiple constraints, limited resources, to make choices. And if you're involved in planning yourself, you may have sat in your office and thought, well, I would like to do more for that particular group of girls, but I don't have the resources. What's the cost outcome ratio? Is it sustainable? What's the most effective measure? Let me look at some evidence. So it's a balancing act, and we're not trying to say it's easy at all. On the next slide, I've just sort of noted here that there's no such thing as a perfect strategy for gender equality. It really does depend on your context, and that's why we put such an emphasis on your analysis. The selection of strategies must be based on clear rationale in order for you to be able to defend them with your colleagues and to secure that resourcing that you need. They need to be adapted to the means, and they must be adapted to the local context. And this is where looking at other countries is really useful, but we do really need to question and check that the context is comparable to our own before adopting a policy from somewhere else. Next slide, this is almost my last slide. So there are just some ideas here when we're looking, and we've got on our website, you'll find many more detailed examples of this. But almost in every intervention, there are ways in which an intervention can be made more gender responsive, a planned intervention. When you look at access and equality, and you're looking at direct, indirect, and opportunity costs of education for the family, are you looking at how those vary according to which child is being considered or what type of household is considered? We're looking at infrastructure. We've already talked about that example of it's not just about the number of schools, it might also be about the safety of those schools and the wash facilities at those schools, particularly for girls. Quality and effectiveness, all of the things listed here, as you've mentioned already, can be gender sensitive or they can be gender insensitive. And governance as well, when we look, we haven't really talked about budgeting. I don't know if you're doing another session specifically on gender responsive budgeting, but of course it goes hand in hand with gender responsive planning. And it doesn't always cost more to be gender responsive. That's the only thing I'll say about that for today, but perhaps you're going to have another session on that, or you can look at, again, resources on the IAP website about what we really mean by gender responsive budgeting. And again, it's starting right from the start with thinking about who benefits and how we can spread the resourcing to make sure that girls and boys benefit equally or equitably. So just in conclusion then, on my last slide, oh yes, that was just something to say. Obviously, you could think about small scale and large scale. Yes, and the next slide gives you 3 ways in which IIEP supports countries and works alongside countries, and you know, we work with communities of practice as well. We really enjoy and find it useful to work with multinational groups of people, just as you are. So we work with governments to co-create and to think about how to analyze and use data and evidence. We develop capacity through training, accompaniment, and through communities of practice. And we provide technical assistance to address context-specific issues through bespoke collaboration. And some of you may have experienced that already. And I think on the very final slide, I've just got a simple slogan that you can remember and perhaps put above your desk. That if we want to really be successful with GRASP, we need to fix the numbers, think about the stats and the data. We need to fix the institution, and we need to fix the knowledge of everybody involved in the delivery of education. Thank you very much, and looking forward to discussion now. Thanks.
Sally, thank you so much. That was so rich. So much we can learn from. There's been a lively discussion and some questions and comments in the chat box at the same time. Mercy, would you like to go through some of the questions or some of they're more like comments in the chat box, or should we open the floor for hands and questions?
Thank you so much, Marianne. We'll open the floor so long while I'm scrolling down the questions. If there is someone who would like to ask our guest speakers any question from their presentations, you are welcome to put your hands up. Thank you so much for both presentations. Thank you, Sally. That was very, it was eye-opening. As you were presenting, I was actually thinking about whether we have any governments that have started their own sector planning without someone external coming to encourage them, like the ministries of education around Sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, I think there's more and more interest in being gender responsive, and there's more and more expectation of it as well, especially from some of the funding partners, isn't there? So I think governments are being required to think about it more and more, and sometimes it's just a question of where can I start with this. So it would be great to hear from people. I can see some of the comments in the chat now, where you've got some experience of trying to do this.
Okay, thank you.
Was there a hand up from Angela? I thought I saw your hand, Angela, for a second.
Yes, it was there. May I ask a question, please? Can I go ahead?
Yes, yes, sure.
Thanks. Thank you very much for the great presentations. This is more of a comment, and it's that we have to start looking for data outside of EMIS. We have to start moving to data that's collected in household surveys, in citizen-led assessment surveys, the mixed Eagle data. There's a wealth of data which I think in previous sessions we spoke about the intersectorality of vulnerability, and we're not going to find much of that data in EMIS. EMIS disaggregates by gender, but if we really want the gender responsive planning data, then we have to start moving outside of EMIS. And health is a big one, and a number of countries are now moving towards a more integrated education management system that links up with health. And we know health is very important for reporting on gender violence, on teenage pregnancies, on various gender disaggregated information, which will help with planning. That's the comment I wanted to make.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely agree. You know, and it's a huge range of qualitative and quantitative data that that can be useful. And I think sometimes, you know, ministries realize that the first thing they need to do is actually allocate some human resource to the data question. So because, you know, at the moment, it may be the case that you know, you get the EMIS and that's it. And actually, in order to really understand the gender inequalities in your own context, you need more than that. And it is sometimes harnessing existing data, and there's just needing people to look at that and cross-reference all of that data. You're absolutely right. It needs to be a wide range of data if we're really going to understand this.
Okay, thank you, Sally. Thank you. And I see most of the writing in the chat box is observations as opposed to questions. Someone said, Innocent says, we have girls from ethnic minorities that face unique issues in addition to being girls from hard to reach areas, living in slum areas, and also girls with disabilities. And then he also commented that in Uganda, we are promoting gender and equity budgeting in all sectors. That sounds great, actually, yeah. Yes, and then Anna's comment that she just made now, and thinking of what Anna is the comment Anna made, I'm thinking more about where in countries like South Africa, where we also have the social grant and we have children who receive the social grants who are obviously disadvantaged. I'm thinking that could also be data which can be used, because we have various data available, especially on orphans and vulnerable children, that could also be used and be useful. Yeah, I think that's all. Those are all the comments that I can see.
I wanted to make a comment to what Angela on the availability of data. Just to mention that when we conducted the guest toolkit in Guinea, Mali, Niger, and Chad, participants, in the exercise, they realized that they were lacking many information related to some of the indicators we see in the guest toolkit. So this makes them aware that there was a need, to integrate, these indicators in tools they develop in order to collect data. So this was like also a great success when implementing this GEL toolkit with country partners. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much, Simon. Does anyone else have a question for our guest speakers? Yes, Rosette?
Mine is actually not a question.
Yes.
I liked the slide she ended with, which is fixing numbers, fixing institutions, and fixing knowledge. I think as Uganda, we have a challenge. For some time, our EMIS has been down. So it's very difficult to fix numbers even when we are working on our strategic plans. The other thing is about fixing institutions. We appreciate we've made some gains. We see men and women almost at the same levels. But I think we also need to fix the social norms that also are within those institutions. The people we see in public offices come from their diverse communities, with their perceptions. So even when they are given positions, say as women, and you don't see them pushing for this gender issue in their plans and budgeting. And I think for me, this is something that we really need to work on. And I'm glad that you mentioned that IIEP offers technical support. How do we then work together to ensure that it's not just us who are attending this community of practice, but we can actually use this to get to our ministries directly, starting with the permanent secretaries, the directors and commissioners, so that they can also benefit from this knowledge. Thank you.
Hello.
Sally, would you like to come in and speak to Rosette while we are waiting for more questions?
Yes, I mean, it's absolutely true that gendered norms and, you know, sometimes we put that together with stereotypes are a key factor in the underlying causes of gender inequality. And sometimes if we were to take a purist approach, we might say, well, we can't do anything until we change those norms. But I don't know if you have this saying in your countries, but sometimes we say that
I think we might have lost her. Sally?
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm going to turn my camera off. I lost connection. So sorry to waste your time. What I was saying is that we have a saying here that sometimes it's the tail that wags the dog rather than the dog that wags the tail. And, you know, you can take that to mean that you don't necessarily always have to wait until every underlying cause has been fixed before you can make some changes that can benefit some girls. So, you know, and it can also have that counter effect. If you start fixing things in school so that girls are, you know, it can be very simple in the classroom. I'm sure you all seen this, you know, helping teachers to see that without realizing it, they're asking the difficult questions to the boys, not the girls. Or saying to the girls, "Oh, can you help me clean the classroom?" You know, it's just practice and habit. And if we can just change some of the practice in the classroom or wherever it is in the planning office, wherever it is, by saying, well, why should we just say, well, that's the way it is, without actually, although we would like to change the norms, and maybe that will happen eventually. But it doesn't mean we can't do anything in the meantime. We can use the data we have, we can collect more data, and we can use, you know, we can make sure there are role models and that, you know, those norms that exist. That's what I would say to that. But it's great to hear that you are doing some stuff in your budget office. It'd be great to hear about that, how you're trying to make sure that that all of your budgeting takes gender into account. That's you know, to try to address it from different angles is the key, I think. Thanks.
Okay, thank you so much, Sally. Thank you so much. We have someone else hands up. Is it Maba from South Sudan?
Yes, yeah. Yes. Hello, Mercy.
Yes, please go ahead.
Hello.
Yes, hi, we can hear you.
Yes, okay. Then it has been a great presentation from our two presenters, and I'm quite impressive. My question is going actually to the first presenter on the area of the developed toolkit. He's talking about the developed toolkit, and the tool can be used even in the country affected. And I'm quite impressed by that. And I was just trying to ask how best this toolkit could be used, especially in the country that are having some areas inaccessible. Is it possible that that toolkit could be used offline and online, and how best that it can be used? So I want some more clarification in a way that the toolkit could work as well as we can adapt.
Okay, thank you, Marco. I think it's directed to Simon.
Yes. Thanks, Mabo. Actually, the toolkit can be used offline. What we have been doing until now is that we receive a request, from the Ministry of Education and local groups from the 4 countries where we implemented the guest toolkit. And upon the receipt of the request, we form, a this group. We are building, on local education group or any of a group like this in the country. And we are organizing a workshop to explain, give more detail on the guest toolkit. And we are putting into place a group of people who are able, to provide indicators that we can use to feed, the guest toolkit. And we are organizing a workshop to present, the results, of this rapid assessment. And after that, we are discussing with a partner on how the results can be used, in all work they are doing, in the field of education in terms of maintaining gender in various documents. What I want to say is that actually we are ready, to support any country who are interested in doing a guest toolkit. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Simon, for that. Thank you. There's another question for Sally. Sally, how do we deal with the issue of political will on gender when poverty is so overwhelming? What about other types of gender discrimination like LGBT? Is there any generic policy which could be shared? And then someone else said, could you please clarify more on your communication and negotiation too?
Yes, sure. So and in fact, I just put a reply on the Lesotho question, which asked about what about if boys are the ones that are disadvantaged? And that's why we talk about it being a gender equality approach. We don't talk about it being a girls' education approach. It can apply. In lots of countries, boys are disadvantaged at certain levels, or face, they face their own barriers, corporal punishment, and other expectations on them. So exactly that's what your analysis will tell you. In terms of the resistance and political will, and how that interacts with poverty, or how that competes with poverty. I think this is where the the intersectional analysis really comes in useful. So, of course, poverty is probably, it has always been, I think, the reason most often cited as to why any child is not in school, because they are more valuable They're either more valuable to the family at home or out at work, or the costs of education are too much. But I think what can be shown in many contexts is that if a family has a choice to make between educating their daughter or their son, in many contexts it will automatically be the son, and there we have an underlying norm. So, you know, there you can bring in some of the bigger data in terms of showing how a country benefits economically if women are educated, how the health of the nation benefits in the long term. The difficulty is that these arguments are long-term arguments. And so, you know, if you have a government trying to make a short-term plan, trying to make an impact, then this is where the conversations are difficult. But in fact, you know, the other question on communication and negotiation tool is related, in fact, because if you're trying to have those discussions within your government, then and you don't have an effective education sector analysis or a full and compelling education sector analysis, it's very difficult to make the case for, you know, spending money on building separate toilet blocks in every school, or on, you know, investing in women's teacher training, or whatever it is, the policy that you've identified that would make a difference. So that's where I see the education analysis as a communication and negotiation tool. In terms of the other types of gender discrimination, you know, these can be very difficult conversations. They can be very sensitive conversations, and I think that they have to be carried out obviously in the context and knowing what the current discourse is around those areas. There's a very useful tool that I think is on our website, which is, it's an adaptation of a tool developed by the International Labour Organization a couple of decades ago, which breaks down the different types of resistance to gender equality and looks at what's behind those. And as so often with all sorts of resistance, you know, resistance is based on ignorance or lack of understanding, and you know, that's a sort of link to fear of the unknown, if you like. And so often, again, the analysis and the data and the evidence that you can put on the table without being emotive can help people to understand that you're not necessarily coming to this from a point of view of which is subjective. You're actually trying to present some objective information which can help inform the plan. So those are just a few thoughts on those questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sally, for your answers. Thank you so much. Participants, I think that we should now move on. If you still have questions, but I've been checking the chat box. I haven't seen any more questions. So we should move now to our case studies for the day, the 3 case studies that we put in the resource pack. Just to find out, did anyone manage to browse through the case studies? In fact, I was going to ask Sally, if she's still here, whether they are based in some African countries, whether you have offices where some of our participants could maybe come and seek advice.
Well, along with Simon at Ungai, the Gender at the Centre initiative has 8 focus countries, but we don't actually have offices in those countries. But of course, we're linked to the UNESCO and the UNICEF offices, so it could be useful to contact those offices. But you will see on our website, if you just look up Gender at the Centre initiative, even if you look at the Gender at the Centre initiative report for last year, you'll see some good examples of the countries in which we are working alongside governments. But there are 8 in Sub-Saharan Africa, and then we have a community of practice which I think has featured people from up to 26 countries now. So
Okay.
some of you might even have been involved.
Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you. Thank you. So we are moving on to the case studies. I was just asking our members if they managed to look at the case studies yesterday or this morning. Gabriel, please, may I have the next slide? Yes. Thank you. Yes. So today, instead of going into Zoom break rooms, we are going to be working independently, looking at some scenarios. We are going to do what we call scenario-based decision-making, where participants will be presented with real-world scenarios related to GRESP and resource mobilization. And the idea is that you make decisions based on allocated scenarios and consider the potential impact of the choices that you make. And as you have to think through your choices and the steps that you would take, it also encourages this approach also encourages critical thinking. Thank you. Next slide. Yes. So yesterday I shared with you three examples from three countries where sector planning was implemented. One of the first ones was Nigeria in Katsina State. And the context there is that Nigeria is currently 168 out of 170 countries on the Gender Inequality Index, which, as you can see, is quite severe. And according to the report you have, inequalities happen more in the northern part of the country, where Katsina State is situated in northwest Nigeria. And I think, as one of our Nigerian participants pointed out last week, that Nigeria operates a federal system where national policies are expected to be domesticated at the state level, and funding for education is provided by all three tiers of government: the federal, the state, and the local government. While a national plan was developed in 2018, we are told that states are largely guided by their own educational sector plans. Thank you. Next. So in this case, what happened in terms of planning in Nigeria is that the planning process in Katsina State was supported by the state GPE team and by United Nations, by UNICEF, and was managed by sector analysis at the federal level and the three states that were involved. And the findings were that the planning process commenced in 2021, and then while the plan is finalized, it is yet to be published. So since 2021, they've been working on the sector plan, and it is not yet published, which would mean that it's not yet also implemented. So we are told that the informers, the people who were interviewed, cited that there is a willingness to share sex aggregated data by those in authority, but there is lack of political will for deeper policy change and to fund and to release funds and final approvals. These were discussed as the bottlenecks for transformative change and plans to implement. Thank you, Simon. Sorry, thank you, Gabriel. Yes, and then in Sierra Leone, you will see that we also have sector planning there that has been happening. I think on Tuesday, we also dealt with the new radical inclusion educational policy that has been implemented in Sierra Leone. In terms of sector planning, the education sector planning process for Sierra Leone was led by the Ministry of Education with support from selected consultants, and key stakeholders within ministries across civil society and other technical partners. It was also financed by a development grant from the Global Partnership for Education, GPE. So in terms of context, Sierra Leone operates in a challenging context. Statistics show that in 2020, the total population was 7.9 million, of which 51% of that population are girls and women. In 2019, 40% of the population was below 15 years old, and the country regularly ranks low on global indices such as health, the Gender Equality Index, ranking 182 out of 189 in 2019, which is a composite index of health, empowerment, economic participation, and educational attainment. Thank you. So the findings for Sierra Leone were that there is a strong high-level commitment to gender equality in education and clear political will to capture this commitment in policies and plans in the sector. The realization of the radical inclusion policy was supported by an active network of civil society and non-governmental organizations who remain keen to hold the government to account on education rights and gender equality. This is a conversation we also had, I think, in the second session, where some of our participants were quite impressed also by the political will in Rwanda, and they were wondering how they could also get drum up political will in their various countries. Thank you. Next. And then the last one, the plans that happened, the sector planning that happened, what happened in Mauritania. So there, each department within the MOE was responsible for developing a part of the PATB, and upon completion, the planning and strategy department compiled it and prioritized actions based on available funding. So in terms of partnerships, this was between, the plans were done by the Ministry of Education, UNESCO, and multiple technical and financial partners. The analysis of the planning process for the 3 years budgeted education sector action plan, well, the analysis of the planning took place over 3 years, and it is also the most recent educational plan that's available from the Ministry of Education. The finding for this one is that there is political effort to include gender in policies and plans in the education sector, which is an answer to external stakeholders' concerns. So having gone just presented you, with a summary.
The screen is failing. We are not.
Sorry.
Hello.
Yes, Maba.
Screen is failing. We are not getting seeing voice.
Is it everyone, or are you experiencing some network issues? Can other people see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Oh,
Mercy.
oh, thank you, thank you. I think it may be your network, Maba. Maybe you need to restart or re-enter the meeting. Okay. Please, can you also put your microphone on? Can you mute it, please? Thank you. So the guiding questions for participants, I would say, from the 3 case studies that we circulated, right? In view of what you have learned from case studies and presentations and discussions that we've been having, including the ones that we've had with our guest speakers, what steps would you take in sector planning in these given scenarios that I'm going to show you just now? For example, what stakeholders would you approach and how would you gather resources for the planning exercise and possible implementation? So today, because we are not doing Zoom breakout rooms, each person can take 10 minutes to look at the case studies that we circulated and then come back to the forum and present very briefly how they would approach these scenarios. May I please have the next slide? Yes, so these are some of the scenarios. The first scenario is, how would you address the digital divide in education for girls in rural communities? We also have, how would you address gender disparities in STEM education, as well as addressing school-related gender-based violence? And how would you allocate resources for gender-responsive education initiatives? Next slide. How would you develop a gender-responsive education policy framework? And also, how would you adapt GRASP to different cultural contexts? And the last question is private-public partnerships and resource mobilization. So just to be clear, you are not being asked to answer 7 questions. You are being asked to pick a question, and the ones I highlighted in yellow would be preferable, but if you want to answer any other question that's not highlighted in yellow, that's also okay. May I ask our participants, do you all have access to the case studies we shared yesterday, the ones that I just summarized for you now?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Yes, we do.
Okay. All right. So the idea with circulating those case studies, as we said at the time when we were circulating them, was so you could see the steps that were taken by the various governments and ministries and other partners to institute sector planning in different countries, so that when you approach these questions, you can also be guided as to how you would approach if you were asked to come up with a sector plan. Does anyone have any question?
I do, Mercy.
Yes.
So are you expecting us to write something down in terms of those headings that we see in the country example? Or are you expecting us just to think about it and answer interactively?
I think we want an interactive engagement. We are asking you to just think about it, and then we can share in an open platform.
And last question, please could you go back to the previous scenario so we can have a look at those?
Sure. What I've also done for those who have access, who can easily access our resource folder, I've also put all the scenarios, the summaries that I gave you in there as well. May we have or is this the slide you want?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else have a question, or should we start counting our 10 minutes? Simon has to rush. He said his goodbyes. He's rushing to another meeting. Hi, everyone. I think some people now have answers, and we are happy to engage with those answers while some people are still thinking out their own answers, especially also considering the time constraints. Anna, would you like to maybe present your thoughts to the open forum? Hi, is it Anna? Angela. Hi, Angela.
Sorry, Mercy. I was like looking around for Anna. Yeah, I was just thinking about scenario one, which is looking at the digital divide in rural areas that affect girls. And my thoughts were that it's impossible to separate out gender in this area, in rural areas, because the main issue is the lack of resources, which affects both girls and boys. So my suggestion would be to focus on teacher training and ensure that they can teach 21st century skills, which includes self-awareness, communication, teamwork, digital skills, all those things. And then teach them using technology and modeling the use of technology. So the emphasis would be on the teacher training to empower the teachers and understand how to engage in technology, how to develop lesson plans that are digitally enabled. In other words, they could project them in the classroom. And in fact, those lesson plans then become open education resource materials that other teachers can also use. And that one would begin to, in order to do this, one would have to look at a sector analysis, which would be looking at what's the availability of electricity and solar in rural areas, what's the availability of devices for teachers, what's the profile of teacher training around the integration of ICTs into the curriculum. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you so much. Anyone else would like to take a question?
Yes.
Yes, Rosette.
Yes, I also did access to digital resources, and I position myself at where I sit. And for me, the most important thing I need to start with is the data on access to digital resources. And I think we can get this from another ministry, so we can see the multi-sectoral use of data sources. And then from the Ministry of Education, I'll be looking at our MEs to see how many learners live in rural settings. And because digital resources are expensive, I would be exploring the approach of public-private partnership to ensure that we can be able to get digital infrastructure, such as computers, but also data resources. And then the other thing will be around teacher training to build their capacity to be able to support the learners as they explore the digital skills. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. But in the different contexts that you've both mentioned, where will you be acting from? Like, what would be your point of contact to start the ball rolling with planning? If I may ask.
For me, the starting point is we need to have data, because as much as we talk about rural settings, they are not the same. There are those that are too deep in the villages where electricity does not even reach. So where do we start from? And for me, that kind of information, which cannot be provided by the Ministry of Education, but with the Ministry of ICT, that would help us to get to know where do we start from.
Yes. Okay, I see. Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
This is
okay. You can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sarafino. I'm looking at at addressing the school-related gender-based violence, because it is one of the scenarios, scenario 3.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm thinking it is very important to address this, because this, like for example, let me take my country. It is happening down there, seriously, in a different form. Now, the important thing is to try to collect data on that in order to identify maybe one form of school-related gender-based violence is what is the ranging, how much is it happening? And then from there, of course, you need to have a policy. You need to have a strong policy there. I know like our aim is not collecting data on what is happening on gender-based violence. It is collecting data, for example, the disaggregated based on gender and that, dropout, retention of girl, gender parity, collecting on that. But on the point of what is happening, what kind of gender-based violence happening in school is not there. So I'm thinking it is very important to collect that on that. To back up the ME system, there must be collection of data on that, so that we know what to address, and then with the policy, strong policy. And that would be very important one. And then also,
Hi, Sarafina.
hello?
Yes, we had lost
Hello?
you for a second there.
Hello?
Yes, you can go. Yes, you can go ahead.
Have you got my first point?
Yes, we got it in full. We were now waiting for your second one.
Okay, the second one, I'm talking about the cultural norm. The cultural norm is another area in our country that is hampering the education of girls, because our people, they believe that our girls are wealth, only for wealth, for getting wealth in a different form. Now, I think it is a high time for us to try to make a data of a different kind of norms, or different kind of the thing which is happening there. Either poverty, either maybe the issue, other issues. We need to be, the data need to be compiled on, and then from there, the decision will be taken. Of course, one of the decisions should be taken concerning sensitization, so that our community, they know that, yeah, it is very important for our girl to go to school. If they go to school, they will even benefit more than what they are benefiting from the girl when they have not gone to school. And when that is done, of course, our people will come to understanding. Thank you. Those are the 2 points that I want to put across.
Right. Okay, thank you very much, Sarafina. Thank you. Do we still have anyone else? Otherwise, our time, we are about 10 minutes over. So I was just wondering, when you were speaking, Sarafina, when you say we need to collect data, so here we are saying, put yourself in the shoes of the person doing the planning. How would you collect the data?
Of course, the data need to be collected, like household survey. Household survey need to be part of the data collection. Because currently, as I speak, we don't have a data that is based on what we are talking about. We have only data collecting generally on schools, but it is not talk. Yeah.
Yes. So you also are you also making the same point as Angela, to say we should take the data that we have and use it or other, which was collected for other purposes and use it for gender responsiveness, because it's either very expensive to collect data or it's difficult.
Yeah, like we have like in our country we have a Bureau of Statistics. We can get information from there. Bureau of Statistics, it is dealing with the census, dealing with the household, and then engage an institution like that to get some of the data.
All right, okay.
No, and then we can use also our partners, can use the data from our partners that are getting some data that we are not getting as a Ministry of Education. From there, we collect all those.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes. Is there anyone else who would like to briefly present their ideas? Or would you like to take the form with you and the questions with you and think about your answers? Hello, everyone. Yes.
Mercy, I just want to draw Serafina's attention to the fact that his Ministry of Health using something called DHIS, which is District Health Information Services, and they track individual patient data. And one of the areas that they look at is gender violence. They look at previous bodilies. So they've got different types of assessing violence, and they disaggregate it by male and female. So, you know, there's that. There's also police records. That's another way in which you could say, let's disaggregate gender violence by districts, and then you get to see which areas, which wards are badly affected by gender violence. Then you will assume that the children as well are also similarly affected. You might be able to get age disaggregated data for that as well. So, you know, I agree. To collect data is very expensive. If they've done a multiple indicator cluster survey, then they could go to their National Statistical Office and ask for that data. And in fact, if they've done a mix 6, which is the most recent one, then they could ask UNICEF, Data Must Speak, to assist in giving them sort of more detailed data. So, you know, do not be disappointed because the data is not in the EMIS.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. I think, we're all reiterating that it's the best way to go. Thank you so much. I think what we can do now, especially seeing the time, unless there's someone who wants to present an answer, I think we can talk about our session next week, what to expect, and then I'll hand over to Marianne. I don't see any hands up, so I'm assuming that maybe people need time to go and think about these scenarios as well. So next session, our session 5, we are going to be looking at measuring the benefits from educating girls and the cost versus benefit of programs, and our learning outcomes that we are expecting that participants will start building an understanding of the cost versus benefit of not educating girls beyond the individual human rights violation, you know, to the socio-economic, political, cultural effects at maybe not just national, but even at a global scale, to say, what does this actually mean? What is the world going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years if we continue the way we are now? And also to obviously visualize that if we do well, what could the world also look like? Yeah. I think that brings us to the end of our presentations for today. I would have really liked to hear, I'm not sure I saw our participant from Nigeria. But I would have loved to hear from our participants from Nigeria and from Sierra Leone if the documents, the case studies we gave you reflect what you are seeing on the ground. Like the things that are in these case studies of sector planning, do they reflect your experiences in the countries where you are? Do we have anyone from Nigeria or Sierra Leone today? Or maybe they were here, they've left. Okay, if not, I will hand over now to Marianne to conclude, to just say a few things to conclude our session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mercy. And what a rich session it was today. There were so many different resources and topics that could become their own session in themselves. So I'm hearing some of your comments, some of your feedback that you'd love to return to some elements from today's session in future sessions. So I think that we're listening to that. We realized that there were a lot of rich resources shared and tools, case studies, and that we need to pick up on some of them in the future. So we're hearing you. I'd like to share my screen for just a moment and show you the learning takeaways survey from today. So we're asking if you can spend just 3 to 5 minutes quickly telling us what you've learned today and how the session made you feel. There are some reactions here. And if you had any questions that went unanswered, as you know, we have a parking lot of questions. This is the parking lot. I'm sharing that now, the parking lot, where we're posting questions that are coming in that don't get addressed or fully addressed in session, or questions that you post on the WhatsApp group, for example, or that you email us. And we'll answer them gradually here in the parking lot. So we're happy to say that they have been answered so far. So going back to the survey, there's a way here that you can add your questions from today. And what suggestions do you have for next time? We want to know, this is the way to give your voice to shape the sessions. This is supposed to be as participant-centered as possible. So please tell us any suggestions that you have so we can try to accommodate them in the next session. So colleagues, I'll just give my thanks again to Mercy for the wonderful session today, and to our two presenters, Simon and Sally, who are no longer with us, but who will be able to support. If you have a question for them, we'll reach out to them with your question. And we will see you on Tuesday next week, and we will be emailing you shortly with some preparation ideas and maybe some work and some reading before the next session. So Mercy, back over to you. That's all I wanted to say. You are a wonderful group. Thank you so much for just the wonderful engagement. Looking forward to seeing you on Tuesday. Mercy, anything else?
I think that's all from me. The participants will probably hear from us between today and tomorrow, just with preparation for next Tuesday. We'll try to give them the working time for them to be able to go through it. But otherwise, I really want to thank them for being so consistent, you know, and coming to all these sessions and also participating. Thank you very much. Maybe people want to switch on their cameras and say bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for being awesome.
I know. Bye.
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 Matsaliso.
Bye. I wanted to hear more from you today. You are so quiet.
No problem. Tuesday is coming. I'll be on.
Okay. But tell me something about the Lesotho question you asked that I didn't answer. I didn't quite understand it. Were you saying that